Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the NYFA Hour. I can't believe it's been this many episodes. We've been running for so long, but it's so exciting. And today is no end to it. It's awesome because today we're talking about VR in documentary, which is an entirely new field, a new way of looking at film, exploring documentary. And we have the chair of NYFA's documentary department, Multer Wellin, to walk us through it. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Hi and welcome. I'm Joelle.
And I'm Pega.
And we're so excited because today we have Multer Wellin in the studio. She is the chair of documentary at the New York Film Academy's Los Angeles campus. She's written and produced hundreds of hours of nonfiction television programming and web content. Her work has been seen on HBO, Showtime, PBS, Lifetime, KCET, the Discovery Channel, UPN, Lifetime, Fit TV, TBS, HGTV, and TLC.
Wow.
She was won a 2013 LA area Emmy for her work on the series television and web series Your Turn to Care, which was also the winner of the 2013 Gracie Award. Ms. Multer Wellin has produced 2 films for the acclaimed PBS documentary series Independent Lens, including Taking the Heat, the first woman firefighter of New York City, a documentary narrated by Susan Sarandon. The first film, Paul Conrad, Drawing Fire, was also selected for the first digital release of Independent Lens films. She is a former chair of the Documentary Reality Committee of the Producers Guild of America, and we are so excited to have her here with us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, listening to all that, it's like, yeah, I'm here to tell the tale. Still here. Yeah.
We're so excited to have you here today, especially to talk about virtual reality and documentary. It's an exciting new field. You just had help me out with the name of the organization.
Yes, we just had about 25 people from the International Documentary Association, which is headquartered here in LA, and we do a lot of stuff with them. And they came to NYFA, and we had a hands-on workshop in virtual reality. It was a day-long workshop. It was terrific. We had some people from the Emblematic group. We had Cedric Gamlin, who is a senior producer there, and also Ivana Coleman, who's one of their marketing manager, who did the sort of kickoff speech. They really describe, VR is so new. There's VR, there's AR, there's 360. There are many different sort of iterations of what virtual reality and 360-degree video are. So the first about hour and a half, they spent really getting down into the fine details of how all these things are different. And then after that, we had Able Cine, which is a big and very prestigious rental company for equipment. They came in with 3 or 4 different, VR is so new that it's kind of like the early days of cinema. Mm-hmm. There are all these different cameras and different theories about the best way to do it. And of course, there's the very cheap cameras that are basically 2 180-degree lenses stuck together that create a 360-degree field. Then there are a lot of rigs that put multiple GoPros, anywhere from 8 to 14 to more.
It's a fascinating new field. Before we get into the
VR,
sorry. She's so excited about it, which is exactly why I invited her here, because she's so passionate about this, and you got me excited about it, which is not something I ever thought I would be interested in. Yeah. You mentioned this feels like the early days of cinema.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to your early days of cinema.
Our first question we always ask everyone.
Yes, we have the same first question at every show. And that is, when did you know you were first in love with movies?
Wow. I really came to it through documentary. I kind of was in love with communication. I actually was a theater major.
Wow.
Originally. And I was interested in political theater. I did an internship with the San Francisco Meme Troupe in college, and other people who really were doing very specifically issue and political oriented theater, which is what I really loved. And then I got out of college and thought, oh, well, there isn't a whole lot of that out here, and I probably can't really make that work. And I had an opportunity to do some research on an HBO show. And I had already been kind of experimenting with some film, and I had taken a whole bunch of film classes. And I just thought this is the perfect medium to talk about things that matter. I always loved movies, but I really fell in love with documentary, particularly when I started working at HBO. I kind of came up as a kid under Sheila Nevins. I worked there as a researcher and an associate producer and a co-producer. I worked there for quite a long time. On a whole bunch of different shows.
Your answer is kind of landmark, because we always get early horror.
Yes.
And that seems to be everyone's jumping off point. It's like, I saw a scary movie when I was little, and I was fascinated, and I had to know more. You fell in love with documentary. Was it working at HBO that got you in, or was it like a particular movie?
I think it was working at HBO. I got a chance to work with some really wonderful directors, and I thought that, this is a way to, put my interests together, to put my real interest in political and social issues into something that was challenging and exciting and hard and, artistic and all these different, so many different, there's a performative level to it, from my theater days, all of these things sort of came together in documentary in a way that I never felt like it did anywhere else.
I love this because it's the same thing that happened with Mira Nair. It's similar to Ava DuVernay's approach, which is once women started working on film, like actually getting to use their hands in and being involved in the process of it, that's when they fell in love. It wasn't so much through the watching, but through the doing,
It
which
was
I find very interesting.
It was the talking to people. It was the trying to find, some of the earliest things I did were try and find people to be subjects of documentaries. I remember we did a show on mediation between victims and offenders.
Wow.
And it was my job to, talk to the mediators. That was not so hard, but actually, having communication with people who had committed murders and then spoken to their victims or the relatives of their victims, it was incredibly intense and really very upsetting. But it was fascinating.
What was your first documentary film?
What was my first documentary film? This is funny. I think the first one I worked on was the very first episode of Real Sex on
On HBO.
Yes, I was a researcher on shows like 1 through 6 or something, or however many we did that first season. Yeah, that was my first, so I had
Quite
to go
the first
and,
dive into
yes, it
documentary
was really
filmmaking.
interesting, yeah.
So, okay, our next question then was like, what fears did you have in approaching your first subjects?
It's a good question. First of all, that I wouldn't blush. I'm kind of like, oh, really? I'm this kind of, I don't know that I was so innocent, but I certainly had not, walked the realm that some of these people were walking. But, I think I've always been really concerned about showing people honestly, and I'm really aware of the responsibility that you have as a documentary filmmaker to the people that you are portraying.
Sure.
They're handing you their life story. And you've got, most of the power, whether you like that or not, whether it wants to be that way, but you're the one who's filming, you're the one who's going to be, editing and making those decisions, so that there's a real responsibility that you have a clear understanding with anybody that you interview that this is okay to talk about.
Are there clear ethics for documentarians and their subjects?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're just instituting a course on law and ethics in documentary that's coming online this next semester. And part of it I'm basing on the Center for Media Studies look into ethics. There's been a lot of, sort of talking to people. People have been making docs for a long time about, what would you do and what would you not do? If someone asks you, for example, if someone confesses to a crime on television, or it's going to be in a film, they endanger themselves in a certain way. You have to be, we had an experience at HBO, we never actually did anything with this, but we sent a guy who had been an FBI profiler to do an interview with John Wayne Gacy, who was one serial killer. This was before he was executed, and we had the tapes, were demanded, we had to turn the tapes over to the FBI. He was, I never really figured out why. He had been in jail for a long time. He had been, the whole stuff, all the cases had been adjudicated. Maybe they felt like there were some bodies they hadn't found, but, I realized that, when things go out into the public, it has an impact. Sure. And sometimes people don't get it, they're so happy to talk to you, and they have to understand, what they're getting into. Yeah.
Documentaries have been around for so long, but it's just recently where we've seen a surge in popularity, especially among younger kids.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there may be a certain, I don't want to call it surfeit, or that people are almost tired of fantasy and story. I think that, maybe people want to hear real stories, and maybe they want to feel like maybe that's something that I could do, or there's something that I could learn about how I could change my world, our world. I hope that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that documentaries have also become more sophisticated. I think they've become much more visually interesting. They're using fictional sort of narrative techniques. They're recreations with actors and animation and virtual reality and, all these different technologies and techniques. So that documentaries are now no more just, sort of like we used to say, interviews in a plant, behind you, or B-roll and interview clips. That's when they used to call it the D word, documentary was, they're so boring, the ones they used to show in high school when I was in high school,
I remember those.
Black and white 60 millimeter, oh my God, not like that anymore,
So let's talk a little bit, I want to say a little bit on ethics and how, like, for example, you mentioned, there can be legal ramifications, and we saw that with the Phil Spector HBO documentary, where he confessed, but he's still on mic. And I'm wondering,
not Phil Spector, it was Durst, Fred Durst.
Fred Durst, yeah.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Not Fred Durst. Fred Durst is the guy.
He's the guy from Limp Bizkit.
No, I know.
It's Durst.
Richard Durst, right?
Something Durst. No, sorry, Limp Bizkit. We didn't.
Fred Durst.
His last name is Durst.
It's
the Jinx.
The recording
The
officer.
Jinx.
Yeah.
Yes, the Jinx. Yeah.
So when you have a student in your class, how do you
Right.
walk them through the beginnings of this? Like, how do you kind of make sure, as you're first starting out, that you're not crossing these very important lines?
Right. Well, I think first of all, it's transparency. I think you have to have, obviously you need to have a release signed, of course, but you also need to have a really frank discussion with anybody you're going to profile. This is what I want to talk about. Are you okay with that? Is there anything that I need to be sensitive about? Is there anything that you're uncomfortable discussing? And that's a negotiation too. Why are you uncomfortable discussing it? Very rarely is it a legal issue. That's a very dramatic, rare circumstance. But there may be something that people haven't discussed with their own families at times.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is just the trust relationship between the filmmaker and the subject. It's not an actor you're hiring who's going to, take off his costume at the end of the day and go home. This is somebody's real life that you're talking about. So that's the first thing, to really establish very clear parameters, so that you're not in a situation where somebody says, wait a minute, I don't want to talk about that. You see it every once in a while, some celeb, flounces off the set, on a morning talk show. But, this is different. You're probably going to be with that person for a number of years, given how long it takes to make most feature documentaries anyway. Yeah.
Has there ever been a time where a subject has not been okay with something that you recorded, maybe had some regret saying something and asked you to not use it, or...
Yes.
Yes. It sounds like it happens a lot.
No, not a lot, actually. But I remember one time we were out on the street for a show I worked on years ago. And we filmed all of these answers to questions. And the next day I got into the office and this guy, he's been calling. He's just called and called and called. And he wants to know who was the producer. And he's like, he had talked about something that he had not confessed to his wife. And he was just desperate that we were going to use this on the air and somehow his wife would see. I was like an associate producer at that. I mean, I was, I had no power at all at that point, but we did not use it. I have to say, we did not use it. But yeah, there have been times where people have said, I'm not really comfortable talking about that. And you either have to work it out in a way that it's okay, or you need to step back.
I'll ask you one more question on the subject of current documentaries. I'm watching Vice a lot, which is one of my new favorite channels. I'm a little bit obsessed with it. And I've noticed that they're taking a lot of people with personalities and a lot of social media power who maybe have never done documentary before and giving them these chances. There's a comedian, Jamili, who they send to places with extremists, people with extremist views, just to talk to people. Do you think it's important for your students to be in front of the camera and hosting if they want to get involved in this new world of documentary?
It's interesting. I find that, I don't mean to sound like Methuselah, but millennials are, much more willing to get themselves out there in front of the camera. And many of our students will do a lot of their projects as the on-camera presence. And I just kind of say, I'd like you to do both.
Okay.
I want you to know how to do both forms. I think it's the typical fish out of water, You always want, comedians are great. They know how to ad-lib. They know how to, just get it going on as a conversation. So that makes perfect sense to send somebody out and have them ask real questions about oh my God, what's this?
Yeah.
That always works. So as I say, but I don't think it's the only modality. And I think if you're really going to work as a producer, you can't depend on that you're going to be the on-camera talent every time.
Okay.
You need to know how to do both, I think.
Let's go into this VR conversation.
Okay, yes.
I'm very excited. You were telling me after you had the IDA there, you were talking about the films that you had seen. I wanted to ask you, what was the first film that you saw, was the first documentary film you saw in virtual reality, and how did it impact you?
It was one of the New York Times op docs, which is a great series, and they've done quite a lot of virtual reality. And I think it's called Clouds Over Sidra. And it was about, Syrian refugees. Oh. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was really, and you do feel like you're there. You're in the desert, walking with these people away from the only home they've ever known to, who knows what future. It was very affecting. It was also a little bit disorienting because, in a 360 environment, you can literally look anywhere you want. And I found that when interviews started, I wasn't necessarily looking where the person talking was standing, right? So in the environment. And I would be sort of rushing around. Oh, there you are, right? That was a little disconcerting. They're getting better at that. Even with titles, I remember there was just one place with titles, so that if you're looking north and the title is south, you don't see it, right? So now they're, spatially placing titles in more places around the environment, so you don't miss it. But as a sort of technical observation, I realized the things that we really depend on, you're going to look at this now, you really give up in VR, and that's both scary and kind of frightening, but exciting and frightening at the same time.
Do you feel like? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Do you feel like anything's jeopardized in VR documentaries? Like, is the story just as impactful?
I don't know yet. I mean, I think that, Celine Tricart, who is the wonderful woman who is a cinematographer and director who's did this IDA workshop for us, she was the moderator, and she's done a lot of 3D and VR, says that she feels that in narrative particularly, she doesn't think that the code has been cracked for VR storytelling. It's very complicated. It's really kind of throwing out 100 years of film grammar. As filmmakers, we're able to say, I want a close-up, and then I want to cut to a master, and then I want to cut to an over-the-shoulder shot. You can't do that in VR. First of all, people would be, throwing up all over the place because you've got to be very careful how you put your, how you position and edit so that people don't literally kind of get motion sickness. Right. But it's giving the controls over to the viewer in a way that filmmakers are not used to. Yeah. They get to decide where they want to look and when they want to look there. And that's a very different concept. So I think I don't know yet. As I say, I'm both sort of really enthusiastic and kind of curious about VR, but I'm also a little afraid of it. I'm a little afraid of giving up that ability to make those decisions. Mm-hmm.
That control.
Yeah, that control.
I think that goes back to your earlier comment about this being a new frontier of film. And I think that while it's challenging, it's kind of the most exciting thing happening right now. Right. And there's been this kind of wave across the Los Angeles campus of VR stuff. The gaming department just also did a presentation.
That's right.
And it was interesting. I sat in the audience for that, and to hear them talk about the difference for gaming, which has been in a first-person kind of 360 mode, at least for the past 25 years, to now filmmaking. And then I thought a little bit about how it's also kind of like theater, and where you can, even though your theater is presented straight in front of you, typically you're allowed to look anywhere, and theater often breaks the bounds of like just being on the stage. You have people coming through the aisles all the time in musicals. Where do you think, what artistic mediums will we have to gravitate toward to try to break this code?
Well, I don't, it's interesting that you say theater, because at one of the IDA events, there were several directors, documentary directors, who've been working in VR. And one of them, I remember saying, it's more like directing theater than it is like directing film, because you literally have to either, hide, or you're going to be in a tiny little one panel that you can paint out later, that you can replace. You really can't move, or you can't be anywhere around. So you've got to sort of set up a scene and let it go. Wow. Let it just unfold in front of you. That's really the only way that you can do VR at this point.
It's a great way to think about it, like theater.
Yeah, but it really is like theater, or something that has its own internal life, right? So an event that's already happening, right? I don't think, why do VR for an interview? Who cares, right?
Sure, yeah.
It doesn't matter. But for something like, a live event, a protest march, or, that's very ungovernable because it's all over the place, but, or some sort of performance, a dance piece. There's a great piece, I cannot remember the name of the filmmaker, forgiving me, but it's called The History of Dance in Cuba. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's just these dancers doing all these Cuban-born dances all over Havana, right? So that's an incredible use for it.
It's interesting because then you run into the risk of directing your subjects, and you don't want to direct when you want it to be natural and really be themselves. So it's a fine line, I feel.
And it is a fine line, but are you directing your subjects when you ask them to walk in the door again because you missed the shot?
Right.
I know filmmakers who would never do that. They're straight down the line, direct cinema. It happens, Frederick Wiseman trained, you get it, you don't get it, you don't talk to them, you don't interview them, it's all, if you get it and you're in the right place, fine. If you don't, oh well. And then a lot of the rest of us are much more sort of, we think about it, we plan a little more. And if there's a shot where, someone's walking down a hallway and wants to come in the door, and for some reason or other it doesn't work right, you might ask them to do it again.
I want to ask you if there is someone you think who's doing this really well already. Is there somebody who's
VR?
getting close to cracking the code?
Yes, this woman, the woman who did the Havana, and also, of course, Noni de la Peña, who's kind of her moniker is the godmother of VR. She's the head of the Emblematic group, she and a couple of other partners, and she's done these amazing things. I mean, she's now gone into animated VR as well, and these 360 room environments, but it's all based on, they call it VR journalism also. One is based on a 911 call of a woman who in a domestic violence situation.
Jesus.
Which is, and it's with animated figures. They only had the audio to work from, but it's very disturbing, and you can actually be part of that environment, because we didn't even talk about when you get off of just the filmed VR, when it's these environments when you're actually like one of the characters in that environment. So you're standing next to, or your avatar is standing next to this woman who's about to be killed. Or there was one a cell phone recording of a kid who admitted that he was gay to his family and was kicked out of the house after being punched and slapped by one of his relatives. And they also did that in animation. Wow. So there's ways of finding real life and getting you into what it feels like. They did one too about Planned Parenthood. And having the experience of trying to get into a Planned Parenthood clinic when people are protesting and, that emotional, really difficult situation, whatever side you're on, So it's that, they call it the emotion, the emotive connection, right? Because you're allowed to, it gives you this sense of presence that you're not just watching, you're not a spectator, you're actually taking part in these events, and that's very powerful stuff.
It sounds harrowing. I think documentary, the goal always seems to be to get you to walk around in someone else's shoes, and to do it in a 360 environment seems to kind of answer that call. I'm curious, what stories would you like to see presented in virtual reality?
Interesting. I think that it could help. I don't think we really understand how other people live. So maybe to do something where you're actually, I've seen those series of pictures of, here's what a family. It was another one, like the bedrooms of.
I saw
did you see that one?
Yeah.
It was just a viral thing.
Like a family's groceries for the week.
That's another one
like.
that they've done. But it's one thing to look at a picture of how someone lives, in a poor village in Africa, but to actually have a day or an experience of, well, okay, you got to walk a mile to the well because this one's dried out. And then you have to wait and try to get a fire lit, and you've got a cell phone, but, it's really hard to get it charged, and you have to be, all of those things that we have no way of knowing. It's one thing to sort of show it, but to have people experience it, one of the women at this workshop was talking about working on a project about someone who had been hidden, a Jew who had been hidden during World War II. And trying to do a traveling museum exhibit or you would be in that little room.
Jeez.
Wow.
I mean, that kind of stuff just, the hair on your arms raises, to try and be quiet and, hear footsteps, and that's incredible stuff. Yeah.
This is fascinating to me because when virtual reality was first presented to me, it was like spectacle, essentially.
Yeah, right.
Like, oh, you can stand in, I was in Chicago, and they're like, you can stand on a cliff in LA and overlook the city, or you ride the roller coaster, or these other very,
coasters.
kind of sensory experiences, which are a lot of fun. So when you brought to me that there was documentary and that it could have this deep, lasting impact on an individual, I think that's really exciting. I want to know how you want to incorporate it with your students, if that's something you would do, and how you might do that.
Yeah, we do have a class going on right now, actually, in virtual reality, for a bunch of different students, from documentary, from filmmaking, from producing. We have a couple of animators there, again, doing this class with Celine. I want them to, they're going to do a couple of pieces. They're going to produce a couple of short VR documentaries. Yeah, I feel like it's a new tool in the toolbox. It's not right for everything. It really isn't. As I said, if it's just a story that doesn't have a lot of action, that doesn't have a lot of sort of experiential scenes in it, then it's probably not right for that. There's no point, as I said, in having an interview in a 360 environment. Who cares? You want to look behind it, there's a bunch of plugs behind there. Who cares, right? It's we don't need to reveal that. But, if it's correct, if it's the right fit, then I think it can be really exciting.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So what kind of technology, like we saw a bunch of cameras at the video game one, and they showed, my favorite one was like 60 GoPros just lined up, and like, guys, it's like a literal, it's like a very tight tool belt that connects in a solid circle, and it just, each little pocket has a GoPro, and that's your 360 camera, which is great, because I know a ton of people who have, like, maybe 10, they can borrow, like, 5 from a friend, and it seems like a really easy way to go. I've seen people try to rig it up with their cameras, where they're just like, I'll just be very, very steady. Do you have a preferred, like, camera setup, or was there one that got you really excited?
Yes. I think that the thing about VR and easy are not words that should be in the same sentence. Okay, that's one from everything that I've seen so far. The jaunt is the one that really got me excited.
What's that?
The jaunt is there's a jaunt VR, and they have a VR channel that you can sign up for and see some of their stuff. And basically they're producing their own stuff. And Celine actually just did a film about the Amazon and the tree canopy in the Amazon that I've seen. The jaunt looks like a 1950s space, like a UFO. It's kind of like cylindrical with ribs that go around, and there are 24 different cameras in there. 24, which means there are 24 different SD cards.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
How heavy is it roughly?
It's not that heavy. It's about the size of a beach ball. And it has, I think there's a camera on the top and the bottom as well. So that's, I think, really intriguing to me, because it's got, the ability to really give you so many, then you have to stitch it all together. There is software that comes as part of it, proprietary software that Jaunt has put together that will help you as you're downloading. It'll be like, we don't have SD card number 3, don't forget,
That's very helpful.
which is very helpful because, with 24, that's...
you certainly don't want to miss that one panel and be like, my whole film.
Exactly, I have this blank space. Yes, that would be bad.
So I imagine the post-production process is a lot more complicated, harder, takes longer.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Oh, very much so. And I am just a neophyte. I'm really just starting to learn about this. But we went through the whole workflow process in the afternoon with Celine. And, first you've got to download everything, of course. And you're not downloading, one card from each camera. You're downloading anywhere from, 2 to 6 to 24 to, from each camera. So that's a lot, Then, of course, you've got to stitch everything together. It's almost like, think of it like a quilt. And each one of those separate image feeds has to be stitched together into one image. This is for video, for live action VR.
And I'm assuming they're still working in a 2-dimensional space, like it's just the one flat screen. They don't have like a 360 monitor set up to see how they're stitching it together.
Right. But yeah, you're working. Yes, you were working on a flat screen.
Editing is hard enough. Like I don't ask for this at all.
It's tough. It's really tough. And then once the software goes through and does it, you've got to really look, because it has a tendency to sort of bend straight lines. And if you see like the door frame or something, and it's right where the two meet, cameras meet, it gets a little funky, it gets a little bent, or takes a little dip. It's very laborious. It takes a lot of work. Then there's the editing process, which is once you've done all of that, she was talking about, really the only way to edit and not get people sick is to have a point that sort of the point of focus from one shot into the next, that there's another point that's going to meet kind of at the same place.
It's like dancers twirling, marking a spot on the wall.
You find that one place so that you don't, lose it completely.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So can you take shots from different takes?
That's a good question. You may have run past my limited store of knowledge here. I doubt it. I mean, maybe you
how
can.
Would it match up perfectly?
Well, yeah. I know that you can paint. You can take out a whole panel. I mean, as in, if you color correct something out or you're painting stuff out, you usually have to paint out either the tripod or some part of the camera, because you can't. It's everything. You see everything. You can't really hide anything. Or, as I say, if you're actually going to have the crew there standing in one part, that has to be replaced. So you would, take an image of a blank wall or something and just cover it up with that.
And now I'm thinking about like audio even.
Oh, well, that audio is really interesting, because one of the ways that they're getting people to pay attention at the right place is positional audio.
Right.
Right. So if you heard, the door slammed over there, wouldn't we all look up? Right. We'd all look over there. So there's a lot of experimentation with, is it on your right side? Is it on your left side? Where do I need to look?
That's so cool.
And those are sort of cues about us. Important's happening over there. You better look over there. I think music can help with that as well. But these are all, it's brave new world out there. It really is.
So this transitions into a question I've been asking a lot, because I'm curious. I don't like watching movies on my phone. Mm-hmm. With VR, I don't have a lot of choice. I have to watch.
It's true.
On my phone. And it also kind of removes an aspect of film that I love, which is theatrical. Like, I love sitting next to people and seeing facial reactions.
I do too.
Do you think that this takes away some of that?
I do. And I think it's in a way, it also reminds me of the very earliest days of cinema. Edison never took out, it was Nickelodeon's, right? And you sat there like this and cranked away, and it was a one-person experience.
Interesting.
And weird little factoid, but Edison, who invented, or at least was the first to really make money on the Nickelodeons, he never took out a patent for a projection system in a theater. So he never thought of it as a mass audience kind of phenomenon. It took other people to invent that. So now we're sort of at that same place. It's you and your little phone, or your little Oculus Rift, or your, whatever viewer you choose to use, and there are a bunch of them, and they're getting better all the time. I think for this to really catch on, they're going to have to figure out a way to do it in a mass.
I predict the
IMAX
theater. Yeah. I think the IMAX Dome will be the first to conquer that.
Possibly.
Because I've been saying for a long time, my school took a lot of field trips to the Navy Pier IMAX Dome, where we saw a lot of like space, and it was super awesome. You literally flying through space and occasionally time to see things.
Yeah.
I would love to kind of see some of these films, especially some of the films you described, which seem just the content heavy, which for me, it's always nice to look at like a person's face and be like, we're connecting in this moment over this very heavy content, where if I'm alone in complete darkness, it just seems sad and really difficult.
I remember, this, so now my age, but when I was a really little kid, we went to the Montreal Expo, and they had this pavilion that had these enormous screens on 4 walls, and I think also on the ceiling. And you walked in, you didn't sit, but with a whole bunch of people, and it was kind of a precursor in a way, because you could look around wherever you wanted to. You weren't just looking in one direction, you were surrounded by this film experience. And it was like redwoods and beautiful Canadian, forests, and it was amazing, actually. You just felt like you were in that forest. And it would be so, I mean, I guess that's what we're trying to get back to, but on a higher level.
Absolutely.
I can imagine people sitting in chairs that swivel, right? And then just have like a control and be able to turn your chair. And it's just a bunch of people turning in the theater going, wow.
All these little, 360 degrees. Yeah. We better get some, strong stomachs, I mean, they're using it in all sorts of, amusement park rides. And, it's pretty amazing stuff.
It's thrilling and exciting. And I'm so glad you brought it to me because I really want to have this conversation. But we're getting close to the end, and I wanted to ask you a couple more questions about your work. Can you tell us about what you're currently working on?
Oh, I'd love to, actually. Why, thank you for asking. No, Margie Friedman, who's an old friend of mine, and I are co-producing a documentary called Orchestrating Change, which is about an orchestra that's based in Burlington, Vermont, called the Me Too Orchestra. It's capital M, little e, letter 2, number 2, orchestra. As in, like, me too, I have been diagnosed with a mental illness. It was started by an incredible conductor and musician named Ronald Braunstein, who is bipolar. And it really kind of ruined his career. He'd been to Juilliard. He'd won all these international conducting competitions. He started having this massive international career. But he was having issues, manic depressive as they used to call it. He was finally diagnosed. And really he was shunned after he made his diagnosis public by the rest of the music community. And he spent many decades kind of, just kind of wandering, trying to, eke out a living. He wound up in Vermont, and he eventually met this woman, Caroline Whidden, who was a career orchestra administrator. They fell in love and got married.
Oh.
And they've started this orchestra that's for people who have been diagnosed with mental illnesses and those who support them. They have 2 orchestras now, one in Burlington and one in Boston. They're starting another one in Portland, in San Diego. The idea is to have an ensemble in every major city in the United States, kind of like Gay Men's Chorus, right? So that every time they have a concert, and they give lots of public concerts, they talk about living with mental illness.
Yes.
They talk about, you can't really tell the difference. There's so much stigmatization of people who have been, diagnosed and then, just go away. People are afraid because there's, every time there's some sort of violent, oh, he's mentally ill. That's why, right? And people think that every person who's mentally ill is violent and is dangerous. It's so far from the truth. Statistically, people who are mentally ill are so much more likely to be victims than offenders. And they're really marginalized with these orchestras, and it's an open, non-audition orchestra. Anybody can join as long as you'll practice and come to rehearsals. You can be part of it. It gives people a sense of community, a sense of belonging. So we've been following them for about 1.5 years, maybe more. So we've seen them grow. We've gotten all of this on film. And on June 25th, they're doing a big concert in Burlington in this beautiful historic theater there. And we're going to be filming both the Boston and the Burlington orchestras playing together for the first time.
Amazing.
So we're very excited. We're very excited about that.
Amazing. And where are you in the process of your film?
This will just about finish our filming. And then, we'll go into post after that.
So if people want to catch some of your work, maybe things that are already out or things that are about to come out, where should they look for you?
Well, there's a website for the film. It's www.orchestratingchangethefilm.com. And I'm not sure what else is around anymore. Look on the Independent Lens website. I think Conrad's still floating around on there, and probably the Women Firefighter film as well.
Great.
Excellent. Cool. So this has been VR with Barbara Multer Wellin. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're
This
so
was
welcome.
a
This was
thrilling
fun.
conversation. I also want to thank David Irvine, who was in the chat with us. Thank you for your very nice comments. We really appreciate it. If you guys are listening to the show and you want to help us out, you can always give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit those 5 stars in iTunes. It gives us life. It lets our producers know that you're watching, that you're enjoying the content you're seeing. We also love hearing from you guys, comments, guest suggestions, anything you guys want to throw in there. We've heard from future students, which is always super exciting. So we just want to thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back next Thursday 4 p.m. with Peter Rayner, who is an amazing, amazing film critic. I'm so excited. We're going to talk to him about how film has changed over the length of his career, what trends are popular, what he likes, what he doesn't like. Peter has a lot of thoughts and a lot of heavy opinions, and I'm really excited to share those with you guys. So until then, I'm Joelle.
And I'm Pega.
And we will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.